Last Easter, my family gave my brother Grant a watch that cost more than my rent. They gave him a card signed by everyone. They gave him a bottle of something expensive that he opened at the table while our mother clapped. They handed him an envelope with a weekend trip for his birthday, which was not for another 2 months, but apparently could not wait. Nobody gave me anything. My grandfather noticed. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a $5 lottery ticket, and slid it across the table without wrapping it. He told me to try my luck. My mother did not look up from her plate. Grant asked if there was more wine. That $5 ticket hit for $10 million. And the family that could not be bothered to buy me a card was about to show me exactly who they were, over 5,000. My name is Selena. I am 28 years old. I do bookkeeping for a small property management company, which is the kind of job that teaches you 2 things. First, that money always tells the truth even when people do not. And second, that the person who handles the numbers is the last person anyone notices. I have been that person my whole life. Welcome back to Rose Drama Stories. Tonight's story is about a woman who was given nothing at the family table, until a $5 ticket from her grandfather showed her who truly saw her and who only saw the money. Grant is a couple of years older than me. He has been the center of every room since he was born. My mother planned his birthdays months ahead. My father framed his certificates, coached his teams, drove him to every tryout. My older sister married a man named Dalton a few years back. Dalton always had some business idea going, but never had a job that explained where the money for it came from. My father liked Dalton. They got along in a way that felt less like family and more like partners. When Grant graduated, both cars drove him to campus. When I graduated, they mailed me a card with a 20 inside and forgot to sign it. My grandfather was the one who noticed things. He ran a small hardware shop in town, the kind with a bell above the door, and paint chips fanned out on a pegboard near the window. He had been there for over 30 years. He kept a jar of butterscotch candies by the register for kids who came in with their parents. He lived in the house right behind the shop. I did not visit him on a schedule. Sometimes I went twice in a week. Sometimes almost a month went by. But every time I walked in, he had something waiting for me behind the counter. A paint chip in a color he thought I would like. A small tool he found at an estate sale. A butterscotch he set aside from the jar because he knew I liked the ones with the gold wrappers. He never said anything about these things. He just put them on the counter when I came in and kept talking like it was nothing. That is how he loved, not with schedules or announcements. With small things set aside and waiting. He had a dream he never called a dream. There was a back room behind the shop where he kept old toolboxes, spare work boots, clean aprons, and tools with worn handles. He used to say that some kids did not need a lecture. They needed someone to put a tool in their hand and teach them how to start. My father laughed at that. Grant called it junk. My grandfather never argued. He just kept saving things. The ticket sat in my wallet for 3 days. I checked it at a gas station on a Wednesday evening after work. I scanned it at the machine near the door. The screen showed a number I did not understand at first. I scanned it again. $10 million. I sat in my car with the engine off. I did not call my mother. I did not call Grant. I did not call anyone. I sat there with the ticket in my hand and thought about the Easter table, the watch, the trip, the wine, the card nobody signed, and the old man who reached into his jacket and gave me $5 because nobody else had given me anything. I called one person the next morning, a financial advisor named Mara. She was in her early 30s, sharp, practical, the kind of person who listened more than she talked. She handled the claim as quietly as the law allowed. She set up the right accounts. She did not congratulate me. She asked me what I wanted to do. That was the first time in a long time someone asked me that question and waited for the answer. Mara did not tell me to lie to my family. She was too careful for that. What she told me was that sudden money does not change people as much as it reveals them. She said if I was not ready to tell my family the real amount, I could start small and watch how they treated it. The $5,000 number was mine. I chose it because it was big enough to matter, but small enough that a decent family should have still been able to say congratulations before asking for anything. I picked up the phone and called my mother. I told her the lottery ticket from Easter had won something. I told her it was $5,000. What happened in the next 72 hours told me more about my family than 28 years of living with them ever had. My mother's first response was to say that was nice. Her second response, less than a minute later, was to mention that Grant had some expenses coming up, and maybe I should think about helping out since the ticket was given at the family table. My father called the next day. He did not congratulate me either. He said that since the ticket was given during Easter dinner, it was technically a family gift, and the fair thing would be to put the money towards something that helped everyone. By everyone he meant Grant, Dalton, and whatever project they were pretending was almost ready this time. Grant texted me that evening. He did not say congratulations. He said $5,000 was not really life-changing money and I should be careful not to waste it on something impulsive because I had never handled that kind of amount before. $5,000, that is what it took. My mother saw it as Grant's supplement. My father saw it as family property. And Grant saw it as proof that I could not be trusted with anything valuable. Not one of them saw it as mine. Not one of them said they were happy for me. I sat at my kitchen table that night and read their messages again. Mara was right. The number had done what no conversation ever could. It had shown me in 3 days that my family did not see money that came to me as mine. And if $5,000 made them act like this, 10 million would have torn me apart. I did not tell them the real number. I told Mara to move forward. Over the following weeks, Mara and I built something quietly. I secured my own future first, a home of my own. Enough safety that I would never need to call any of them for help. Then I told Mara what I wanted to do with the rest. I wanted to do something for my grandfather, not because he asked. Because he was the only person at that Easter table who had looked at me and thought I was worth even $5. And because I could not stop thinking about the back room behind his shop, the one full of old toolboxes and work boots he had been saving for kids who needed a way to begin. Mara helped me set up the $5 start fund in my grandfather's name. Not a family fund, a community fund. It would help young people who had lost family, or who had no one able to support them, learn a trade. It would cover technical classes, first toolboxes, work boots, certification fees, and apprenticeship support. My grandfather did not know about any of it. Not yet. If you are still here with me, tell me where you are watching from tonight. I read those comments more than you think. The ceremony was small. A Saturday afternoon at the community center. Mara helped organize it. A few local business owners came. Some of my grandfather's old customers. A teacher from the technical school. The first 2 recipients of the fund were there, both young, both nervous, both holding acceptance letters they would not have been able to use without help. My grandfather did not know what was happening when I drove him there. He thought we were going to pick something up. When he walked in and saw his name on a banner and a room full of people he recognized, he stopped in the doorway. He did not move for a long time. One of his old customers walked up to him and told him that years ago, he had given her lumber on credit when her porch collapsed and she could not afford to fix it. She said she never forgot that. A man in the back stood up and said my grandfather had taught him how to cut tile when he was a teenager, and that was still how he made his living. The first fund recipient, a young woman with paint on her work boots, told the room that the scholarship meant she could finish her welding certification without choosing between tuition and groceries. My grandfather sat in a folding chair in the middle of that room and cried for the first time I had ever seen, not because of the money, because he had spent 30 years doing quiet things for people and nobody had ever put them in the same room before. I stood in the back. I did not make a speech. I did not need to. After the ceremony, I drove him back to the shop. He was quiet the whole way. When we got there, he stood beside my car and looked toward the back room of the shop. That was when I told him. Not every detail, not the accounts or the legal parts Mara had handled. But I told him the ticket had not won $5,000. I told him it had won enough to build the kind of start he had been trying to give people all his life. He did not say anything for a while. He just stood there looking at the back room where he had been saving toolboxes and work boots for years, waiting for something he could not build on his own. Then he looked at me, and his eyes were wet, and he nodded once, slowly, the way he did when he understood something all the way through. That evening, a reporter from the local news station posted a short piece about the fund online. Someone shared it. By the next morning, it had been picked up by 2 other outlets. The article did not say 10 million. Mara had made sure of that. But it named enough of the fund to make one thing obvious. I had not won $5,000. My mother saw it on her phone during her lunch break. I know this because she called me 45 minutes later. The 72 hours that followed were very different from the first ones. My mother's voice was shaking when she called. She asked me if what she had read was true. I told her it was. She asked me why I had told them it was $5,000. I told her I wanted to see what they would do with a small number before I trusted them with the real one. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said that was not fair. I told her neither was suggesting I give $5,000 to Grant before the sentence was finished. She did not have an answer for that. My father called an hour later. He was slower, more careful. He asked how long I had known. I told him since the week after Easter. He asked why I had not told them. I told him I did tell them. I told them 5,000. And they had shown me in 3 days that even that amount was not mine in their eyes. He tried to say something about family sticking together. I asked him where the family was when I graduated, and nobody drove me. I asked him what family meant when the card had no signature. He was quiet. Then he told me he was proud of me. It was the first time he had ever said that, and it came after he read a number on a screen. I heard it. I just did not feel it the way I think he wanted me to. Grant called last. He did not start soft. He told me I had humiliated the family by putting money into a public fund instead of helping the people who raised me. I told him the people who raised me gave me a $20 bill and an unsigned card for the biggest day of my life. I told him the man who gave me $5 was the only one who ever treated me like I was real. He told me I was being selfish. I told him $5,000. That was all it took to show me what I was worth to him. He tried to talk over me. For once, he could not turn the room toward himself, because there was no room. There was only the truth. Then I said goodbye. I did not answer calls from my family for a while after that. Not because I was punishing them. Because I had nothing left to explain. If your family only noticed you after something changed, remember this. They may not have seen you. They may have seen what you had. A few days later, the community center held a small follow-up afternoon for the fund, mostly for photos and thank you notes. I went because my grandfather asked me to. I did not know my family would come too. My mother tried to hug me near the entrance like nothing had happened. My father shook hands with the local reporter and said something about how our family had always believed in helping people. Grant stood close to my grandfather, just near enough to be in the pictures. For a moment I felt that old feeling again, the one where something I had done was about to be carried away and placed in someone else's hands. Then the reporter asked my grandfather if he wanted to say anything. He looked uncomfortable right away. He was not a speech man. He was a man who fixed loose hinges and counted nails into paper bags. But he stood up anyway, holding the back of the folding chair with one hand. He looked at the room first. Then he looked at me. He said he had spent most of his life thinking that quiet people were easy to miss. Then he said he had been wrong about that. Quiet people were not empty. They were usually the ones carrying the most. The room went still. He said Selena had never needed a spotlight to do the right thing. She had never needed applause to keep showing up. She had taken a $5 ticket that everyone else treated like nothing and turned it into a future for people who worked with their hands. Then his voice cracked a little, but he kept going. He said he had given me that ticket because nobody else had given me anything that day, but I had given it back to the world bigger than he ever could have imagined. Grant stopped smiling. My mother looked down at her hands. My grandfather turned toward me then, with everyone watching, and said I was the best thing that had ever come through the door of his shop. I do not remember what the reporter asked after that. I do not remember who clapped first. What I remember is the sound of my grandfather sitting back down, and the way he reached for my hand without looking at me. When the photo was taken, my family tried to move closer, but the first scholarship recipient stepped beside me. Then the other one did. Then my grandfather stayed right where he was, on my other side. That was the picture they used in the article. My family was not in it. Who in your life saw you before anyone else did? Not after you succeeded. Not after the numbers changed. Before any of it. Drop their name in the comments. They deserve to be said out loud. I went to see my grandfather a few days after that. He was behind the counter sorting nails into bins. The bell rang when I walked in. He looked up and smiled the way he always did, like I had not been gone at all. He reached under the counter and put something on the surface between us. A butterscotch candy with a gold wrapper. He had been saving it. He told me he did not need the money. He did not need his name on anything. He just needed me to keep coming through that door. That was always enough. I do not visit my grandfather on any particular day. I go when I go. Sometimes I bring him lunch. Sometimes I just sit in the shop while he works. Every time I walk in, there is something waiting for me on the counter. He never mentions it. I never ask. The fund is still running. Since then, more students have started with help from it. The back room behind the shop is not full of junk anymore. It is full of beginnings. My grandfather's name is on a small sign at the community center. He has never gone to see it. He told me he does not need to see his name on a wall. He said he would rather see me walk through his door. The $5 ticket is still in my wallet, creased and soft from being carried around. It is not worth anything anymore. But it is proof that on a day when nobody in my family thought I was worth a card, one person reached into his jacket and gave me what he had. So I keep going. I walk through his door. I do not need a reason. I do not need a schedule. I just go. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.